So, I finally watched Bohemian Rhapsody, and it's okay, but it does have some really glaring problems that stop it from being as good as it really should be. I realise me talking about this film is a little bit late to the party, but that's kind of what this series of videos is. If you saw my video last year about Solo, a Star Wars story, this video is pretty much the next one in those series of videos, talking about a film quite a few months late and basically bringing my opinion to the table. And I've got to admit, I've got quite a bit to say about Bohemian Rhapsody, especially coming from someone who quite likes Queen's music. So, yeah, where do I begin? So rather than starting with the positives, I'm in fact actually going to start with the negatives, because I feel like the negatives are the things I want to get off my chest first. The biggest negative I have about this movie is the editing. The editing at some points in this movie is absolutely atrocious, especially during the first half of the film, where for some reason they decide to rush through the events that happened so bloody quickly that it does feel like they're skimming over some really important details. Like, the best example I have is that in one scene, Freddie joins Queen, and then within a matter of seconds, they're on tour for their first album. Do you know what I mean? I feel like there's bits in the middle of that are missing, and that entire first half rushes through the entire, foundation of what Queen was so bloody quickly that it does feel like they're skipping quite a few important things. But that's not where my gripes with the editing end. No. The biggest gripe I have with the editing, and you've probably seen that meme that's going around, of that one conversation between the members of Queen and their manager. There are like a million different cuts in that scene, and there doesn't need to be, because it's just a bog standard conversation scene. You do not need to cut 1,000,000 times a second just for a normal conversation. It's distracting and it's annoying. And it happens not just there, but it happens in a couple of other scenes as well, where people are just talking and there are like 1,000,000 different cuts, and there doesn't need to be. Again though, this only happens in the first half of the movie. The second half of the movie is actually pretty well paced and manages to even out the problems that the first half had, and actually takes its time to tell you what is going on and to show you what is going on. Another problem that I had with this movie is that if you're looking for any character development for any of the other band members beside Freddie, then unfortunately you're not going to get that. The only people in the film that get any sort of character development are Freddie Mercury and his wife Mary. That's it. All the other band members kind of get pushed to the side. You get a bit of Brian May, you get a bit of Roger Taylor, and poor old John Deacon, he just gets sidelined so hard that he's, like, whenever he does speak in the film, his role is so minimal that I can sum it up in a really small sentence. He's just the voice of reason. That's it. Whenever they're having arguments, he's usually the one to try and stop the argument and just wants to get on making the music. Yeah, that's literally all he's there for. Brian May and Roger Taylor, like I said, do have a little bit more to do, but in terms of their development, it's non-existent. Which is a real shame, because I realised that the main focus is going to be on Freddie Mercury, but just a little bit of, development or background information on Brian May or Roger Taylor or even John Deacon would have been kind of nice, or just a scene focusing on them. Just something to change it up a little bit. Also, there are a few moments in the movie that are kind of cheesy, and not in a good way. They're just kind of painful to get through. They're not there's not many of them, but there's enough of those moments where it's like, ooh, okay, that's cringy a bit. But yeah, in terms of negatives, that's really all I have to say with the movie, and those negatives really do bring it down quite a bit. However, the positives, when the movie does get into a good swing, are good. Rami Malek as Freddie Mercury, as you've probably heard everyone say, is really good as Freddie Mercury. He gets all the little mannerisms down. His voice can sound a bit caricaturish at times, but when it really needs to work, he does deliver a somewhat convincing performance, especially nearer the end when he realizes he has AIDS. I think he manages to nail his voice around about that time. But there are a few moments in the movie where his voice does and his mannerisms do come across a little bit cartoony. Though they don't get much character development, the people playing the other band members of Queen are pretty good. Ben Hardy, unfortunately, is the only one that looks like they're themselves. Whereas William Lee and Joe Mazzello look like the people they're supposed to be playing. William Lee looks almost identical to Brian May, and Joe Mazzello, I shit you not, is a spitting image of John Deacon. Also, I thought that a lot of these side characters were pretty interesting as well. Like, you got Aidan Gillen playing their manager. I thought he was really good, even though he doesn't get much to do. Mike Myers is in the film for a little bit. I mean, he's there. Don't know really what else to say about that. Also, really pointless side note, but whoever they got to play Bob Geldof for the small scenes that he's in to promote Live Aid, he's fucking perfect. Like, just watch an interview of Bob Geldof from 1985, and you will see that they've absolutely nailed that casting choice. And I know that's not the right thing I should be taking away from a movie about Queen, but I shit you not, I was more impressed by the guy who was playing Bob Geldof than any of the other shit that was happening in the film. That's not a good sign. That's really not a good sign if one of your biggest praises is to someone that only gets 5 minutes of screen time. No, that really isn't good. That really isn't good at all. However, the thing of this movie that impressed me the most was the final scene where Queen finally do play Live Aid. That scene somehow managed to give me goosebumps, which I'm very surprised that was able to do that, seeing that I was lukewarm about the film for pretty much most of its runtime. And then the ending happens, and I suddenly feel a lot of emotions. And I think it's mostly to do with the setup of the scene as well. I mean, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Bohemian Rhapsody, but it's based off of real people, so spoiler alert for real life history, I suppose. But the week before they played Live Aid, Freddie Mercury told his band members that he had AIDS. And I think it's because of the fact that they go to play Live Aid, giving it literally everything they've got and giving the performance of the day and one of the best performances in history, with the fact that they all knew that Freddie was going to die at some point, I think just makes that scene a lot more impactful than if they just went straight from one thing to Live Aid. The fact that they have that bit just beforehand of him telling the bandmates that he is diagnosed with AIDS, I think really makes the Live Aid bit just a little bit more powerful. Also, in regards to the Live Aid thing, they get everything down to a T, whether it's the feel, the mannerisms, there's even subtle little things that Freddie Mercury does on stage that you can see him doing in the actual footage if you look it up on YouTube. Like, everything from the way he walks across the stage to him tweaking a little amplifier on top of the piano, somehow Rami Malek gets every little mannerism down to a T. So those are my thoughts on Bohemian Rhapsody. If I had to give it a rating, then I'd probably give it something like maybe a 6 out of 10. Due to the fact of that first half being rushed through so fucking quickly. But yeah, if you've seen Bohemian Rhapsody, let me know in the comments what you thought about it. I presume a lot of you have seen it by now, seeing that this review is very late. But like I said though, this is not a proper review of the film. This is just my thoughts and me bringing my opinion to the table several months after it was actually released, like I did with Solo: A Star Wars Story. So guys, those were my thoughts on Bohemian Rhapsody. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye!